If someone had like a very vivid dream that something was going to go terribly wrong, a plane crash, an avalanche, a death, how would you convey that information? I was reading these books of prophecies and premonitions, these collections that tell you kind of creepy stories of, you know, a girl says, I'm going to die at 4 o'clock next Tuesday, and then sits in the chair and dies at 4 o'clock next Tuesday. And I kept coming across little mentions of this thing called the British Premonitions Bureau, an experiment in the 1960s to collect these dreams and misgivings and forebodings to predict and prevent disasters. The story really begins in October 1966 with a terrible disaster in a mining village in South Wales called Aberfan. A huge heap of coal waste had been sort of massed on the hillside above the village. There'd been weeks of heavy rain, and it shifted, and then it slid down the hillside and crashed into this village, including a junior school where 116 children were killed, and 18 houses in the village were destroyed. It was kind of this enormous national disaster, and among the people that came to the village the following day was a psychiatrist called John Barker. John Barker worked at a large mental hospital, and Barker's this fascinating character. On the one hand, he's this classically trained doctor. He'd been to Cambridge, he'd been to St George's Medical School, he published in The Lancet, and alongside his psychiatric practice, he also had this lifelong interest in the paranormal. He came up with the idea of something called pre-disaster syndrome, a feeling of suffocation, feeling of kind of dread or sort of borderline depression when something bad was about to happen. And in the sort of chaotic first reports coming out of Aberfan, Barker started to hear of these strange things of people having portents or hunches or bad feelings that this was going to happen. Some of these premonitions were really quite specific. There was a story of a little girl who really didn't want to go to school that morning because she had a dream that her school wasn't there anymore. It had been covered in black. And her mother said, "Oh, don't be so silly, go to school." And she died. Barker was kind of stirred by this, and he came up with the idea of what if I tried to collect all the premonitions that there were of Aberfan across the country. So he called a contact at the Evening Standard newspaper in London, Peter Fairley, and a week later Fairley put this appeal in the newspaper. They got 76 replies over the next couple of weeks. And on the strength of those Aberfan predictions, Barker and Fairley together came up with this idea of a Premonitions Bureau to collect dreams and bad feelings from the British public on any subject, and then to kind of test those hunches against disasters that might happen over the following year. What they tried to do that hadn't been done before was to collect premonitions before the event. The way it worked is you'd call the Evening Standard, you'd be put through to Fairley or to his assistant, and they would log the premonition on a special form that they designed, and they had a date stamp, and then they categorized the premonitions into different categories like air disasters or the royal family or space. These things coming in and trying to match people's dreams against events that were happening around the world. They started the experiment in January 1967. They got 20 in the first 48 hours, and most of the things that came in were a little vague. But within a few months, it became clear that there were some contributors who had a pretty good hit rate. There were two contributors, a man called Alan Hencher, who was a switchboard operator for the post office, and a woman called Kathleen Middleton, who was a piano teacher in Enfield in North London. They both had premonitions of the Aberfan disaster, which was how Barker became aware of them. So both experienced physical symptoms along with their premonitions. Hencher complained of a dull headache that would grow and grow and grow like a steel band across his head, that would only be relieved when the disaster happened. Middleton seemed to have a variety of ways that she experienced premonition. She had dreams, she had these choking sensations, she would see blaze of lights, but she would also claim to see numbers or letters or names of places would also appear to her. So within a few months of the Bureau being set up, things took a strange turn. In April of that year, the Bureau had, if you like, its first significant hit where Alan Hencher seemed to very accurately predict a plane crash in the Mediterranean. He predicted in March that an airliner would crash with 123 or 124 people on board in the mountains over the Mediterranean. And exactly 30 days later, an airliner crashed in Cyprus. And the next day, Hencher called Barker in the middle of the night and said, I've been worried about you all day. And Barker said, why? And Hencher told him that his life was in danger, and that he should watch out. And Barker said, do you think I might meet with some kind of fatal accident? And Hencher said, yes. He'd thought deeply about what happens when someone gives you a troubling prophecy of your own future, and suddenly he's presented with his own one. By the summer, both Hencher and Middleton were warning Barker that his life was in danger. She wrote to the Premonitions Bureau saying, I think this could signify a death. I've been in a trance all day. And then Barker had a stroke, had a brain hemorrhage 3 weeks later.